And we just want to just started. I am going to ask Patty if you can just start the recording. That way we can share this session with any students that weren't able to attend. So if you can start that recording. But I am Lisa Branshaw, and I work in the Global and Experiential Education Office. So some of you may be familiar with seeing me by video from the information session that Professor Helm gave at the start of the spring semester as we were advertising this summer program. So we're happy to have you all participating in the upcoming program to Sweden. And I have developed this presentation, and this is information that I share with all of our short-term study abroad programs that depart. And it's really meant to be a resource for you of the services that are available to you as GW students when you travel overseas. And then also I'm going to talk a bit about the Cultural Navigator tool and the assessment that we asked you all to complete. So the agenda for today, I'm going to talk briefly about our travel as well as our code of conduct, and touch on a few health and safety reminders for traveling to Sweden, and then just general reminder any travel internationally that you do under the GW name. And so there's a few individual preparations that you can do to get ready for your own travel, and then we'll discuss in detail, as I had mentioned before, the Cultural Navigator platform. Chat box, so if you do have questions throughout the program, feel free to write them, and then Patty, who is assisting with the webinar today, can just let me know different points through the presentation, and we'll open it up for any questions that you may want to ask through the chat box that Patty can share with myself and Professor Helm. Policy. So since you are traveling under the GW name and your role as a GW student on this course to Sweden, you are expected to abide by GW's travel policy. And the goal of the travel policy is really to allow students to take advantage of these international opportunities to globalize their degree, but making sure that in doing so, you're mitigating any risks that are involved with international travel. So any university-supported programs fall under this travel policy, and so you are subject to it, and you are complying already with the policy through the GW Passport online requirements. I've seen that many of you have completed those GW Passport online requirements. I want to thank you for doing so. I think there's just one or two students that are missing a few, but you'll be getting an email from our office if you are missing anything. I to also remind you to activate your account with HTH Worldwide if you haven't already, and that is something that I'll outline in this presentation, so you can see the steps to do that activation. And as I mentioned before, there are individual preparations that you should do in order to prepare for your travel that helps you comply with our travel policy. And again, I will touch on those later in the presentation. As I mentioned before, you're traveling under the GW name, you're traveling in your role as a GW student, and so you are expected to abide by GW's code of conduct as well as the US, DC, and local laws in Sweden. If you're ever unsure as to what the expectations are for you for your participation, there is a study abroad participation agreement that's in the GW Passport system. It's a 4-part agreement. It's broken into 4 parts, so you can just review any of those items to any of those parts of the agreement to really see what the expectations are for you as a student traveling on this program to Sweden. But of course, you're getting academic credit towards your degree at GW for taking this program. So keep in mind that things like attendance and performance are at the same level as any of your other classes that you take at GW. And if you are not in compliance with any of the code laws that I just mentioned, you can get removed from the program. Professor Helm, as the faculty director, is the university representative, and she can make that call to remove you from a program. And if that were to happen, you would have to return home at your own expense and not get a refund. So it's not anticipate to happen, but we want to just kind of say this to emphasize that you are representing the university when you're traveling to Sweden, and so to make sure that you're behaving accordingly. I want to accompaniment policy. So this is something that has been included on the program's webpage, as well as the participation agreement that I mentioned before. And basically, just like you wouldn't take, any friends or family with you to your classes, either on campus or online, you also should not be taking any family or friends with you to Sweden during the dates of the program. So definitely encourage students to take advantage of their time in Europe and in Sweden. If you want to do any, kind of pre or post program travel with friends or family, you're certainly welcome to do that. But within the dates of the program, any services that have been arranged by GW for students, such as lodging, group meals, cultural activities, those are all restricted to students who are enrolled in the course. So worldwide, I did want to open it up to see if anyone had any questions in terms of behavioral expectations or accompaniment policy or GW travel policy. All right. So continue on to talk about HTH Worldwide. For any students who have traveled previously on a global and experiential education program or a program through another office at GW, know that we contract with HTH Worldwide for travel assistance and health insurance. HTH Worldwide is a very robust policy, which I'll go into a bit more detail on a further future slide. I want to highlight that they do offer medical assistance services, such as, they do a U.S. health insurance. They have a network of providers that they partner with in countries across the globe. So anytime that anything happens to you, you can work with HTH Worldwide, and as long as you go to one of their providers, you would not have to pay anything out of pocket for those expenses. You could also go to any provider, be it part of the HTH Worldwide network or not, if it's a provider, it would take an additional step to make sure that that's paid for. But as some of you may know, other travel health insurance programs are usually done through reimbursement, so you would have to pay for any services that you've received out of pocket and then ask for reimbursement. The difference with HTH Worldwide is that they work directly with providers to make sure that the payment is covered, and so students aren't having to pay anything out of pocket for those expenses. Provide security assistance and of a need to evacuate students from an area. They provide legal referrals, which we hope will not need while you were in Sweden. Like the mPassport app. So you all should have your mobile phones near you, so you can open up your app store and download the mPassport app. That is going to be a really useful tool for while you are in Sweden, because again, it lists out the hospitals, clinics, pharmacies in Sweden. In Stockholm, it has a location option so you can see what's in your area. It also has medical translations, so for some prescription medication or over the counter, if you want to translate from one to the other, you're able to do so. You will see translations for common medical phrases in different languages, which is also helpful. And then you can, as I would encourage to do, sign up to get alerts from HTH Worldwide through the mPassport app, either by text or by email. So they are constantly monitoring the security and health situation of all the destinations you travel to, and so you can sign up for specific alerts for Sweden or any other countries you might be traveling to. So as I mentioned before, that's part of the online information, the robust resources that they have both in the app and on the website. And so, again, it's just a wealth of information that I highly encourage you to take some time to look through before you're traveling on your program. So enrolled in insurance with HTH Worldwide. The dates of coverage are listed on this slide, and they were also shared in a prior email from our office to you. It's from August 5th through the 15th, and so that includes a buffer day before and after for any travel you're doing to get to the destination. If you are planning to travel outside of those coverage dates, you are able to enroll in additional coverage, and it's highly encouraged that you do so. And to purchase additional coverage through HTH, it's just less than $2 a day. I think it's $1.64 currently. So it's not much extra expense to make sure that you know you have health insurance coverage the entire duration of your stay overseas. There is also for non-participants. So if you do have family or friends that travel traveling with you, specifically family, would be able to be covered for those dates outside the program, enrolling in a similar plan. So you can contact HTH about that if you need more information. But here on this slide is a summary of the benefits that are included in the insurance, and the specific policy with a lot more information is also included on the HTH website. Here's what the HTH website homepage looks like. So you click where it says log in or register if you're for the first time. Know that you will need to provide an email address, and this must be your GW email address. The reason being is that that's the email address we used when we enrolled you in the coverage, and so it's important to use that same email address when you're logging into the system for the first time. You all would have received an email from HTH Worldwide, what's called a certificate number. That is what you would include when you're registering either on the website or in the mPassport app for the first time, and the certificate number is unique to you. So when you were enrolled in the HTH health insurance coverage, which was a few months ago, you would have gotten an automated email from HTH with that certificate number. If you can't put it in your email, you can email us, and we're happy to have it resent to you. You'll need that certificate number in order to register in the system. So a session where we encourage participation. So I'm going to ask you questions or have scenarios throughout the presentation. The first question is, who can the GW travel health insurance provider? I'll give you a few minutes to answer. Or you can answer by unmuting your microphone. Which is HTH Worldwide. That is the correct answer. So again, this is just repetition to help you remember who your insurance provider is when you're traveling overseas, so that it comes to mind pretty quickly. And there are a few health precautions for Sweden that I wanted to bring up. But first, in general, I always like to tell any students traveling in our short programs that students have traveling, as many of you know, having traveled before yourselves, you are putting your body in a new environment, and so you're making yourself more susceptible to getting sick. Travelers have a risk of becoming ill in any country, and so that's why it's even more important to make sure that you're getting enough sleep, that you're drinking enough water, and that you're listening to your body for anything that might off while you're in Sweden. Now, Sweden, the food is, you can vegetables, but again, I think it never hurts to make sure that things are cooked properly and thoroughly before you're eating it. And then also, just kind of, there may be street food vendors, and so just using your own kind of best judgment when you're selecting those options, because again, you could, any type of stomach bug, and we don't want you, kind of missing any of the programs, since it's such a condensed program, and you're very busy throughout the week, and so we want to make sure that you're able to be healthy and participate in all that the program has to offer. One recommendation I have is always to carry prescriptions in original packaging, and this is just in the event that you need a refill, you have the name of the prescription. There are some countries in Europe that, certain prescription medications in the U.S. Are not sold. A good example is in some European countries, people who have ADD, Ritalin is not available. So that's why if you have any prescription medications, it's really important to make sure that you get additional reasons so that you have it available to you if you need it while you're in country. And then I also recommend carrying any over-the-counter medication with you while you're there, because again, you don't want to have to go to a pharmacy and try to look for it. You could use the mPassport app as a guide to help you if you needed to get some aspirin or for your stomach, but it's also much easier just to purchase that before you go and bring it with you. On Sweden and any health precautions they have is available on the mPassport app and on HTH website website. They have city health profiles for Stockholm. With a scenario, so take a minute to read through the scenario, and then I'd like to ask you to respond to how you would answer how you would respond in that situation. And with the chat box, if you could just make that you're answering to all participants so that everyone can see your responses. So the hotel, and that's true if you're not feeling up, you know, and you know your body better than anyone else, and so you can read if the stomach pains you have are something where you may just have to take some over-the-counter medication that you brought with you, and then you'd like to continue participating in the program, or if it's severe enough where you would need to stay at the hotel, you know, that you're telling either Professor Helm or what and how you might be able to, I can help you with getting in touch with HTH to set up an appointment if you need with a local doctor in the area. All the doctors that they've vetted speak English, and so you would be able to get an English-speaking doctor to help you if need be. But again, it's really important to make sure that you're informing Professor Helm and Eileen if you're at all feeling under the weather. So it looks like, yeah, we had another student respond with that recommendation, so great. Before I switch over to the security side of things, do anyone have any questions related to the HTH Worldwide health insurance coverage or the portal or the mPassport? And also, since many of you travel and have traveled overseas, if you have any other recommendations in terms of safety while you're traveling overseas, we'd love to hear them. So I'll leave a few questions or comments or tips. I will switch over to the security side. So Sweden and Stockholm have a low risk rating from HTH Worldwide. There is still some standing security advice that I wanted to review with you. So there are some risks that face travelers in Sweden, and you know that the country is overall very stable. There is a low threat of terrorism in Stockholm as there is in much of the continent of Europe. Sweden has prioritized you know, terrorism measures, specifically from potential Islamic State plots. So something to be aware of for travel to Sweden and any other travel you might be doing around Europe. It's still considered a low threat in Stockholm. I would say the biggest important piece in terms of staying safe while you're in Sweden is going to be watching out for opportunistic crime. Things like petty crime such as pickpocketing or burglaries due to happen more, as it mentioned, during the summer season, especially in tourist hotspots such as the Old Town, which you will be visiting as part of the program. So, destinations that are frequented by tourists are, an area where there's also people looking to take advantage of tourists. So just making sure that you're aware of your surroundings, aware of your belongings while you are on these different visits for this program, I think is highly encouraged. Experience some protests in Stockholm. Again, they're rare, but usually they are peaceful and don't lead to any localized violence, but there is always that potential. And so by signing up for the alerts through HTH Worldwide or the mPassport app, you would be able to know in advance if any protest is happening, and that way you can avoid that area. That I recommend for students traveling on any of our programs. And so I think the first thing is really just being aware of the city. And so you use your smartphone while you're traveling. I encourage students to look into what the cost is of international data on your U.S. number, or potentially purchasing a chip while you're in Stockholm for the time you're in Sweden. That way you do have access to data or anything else that you have on your phone anytime during the program, and you're not having to wait to be connected to a Wi-Fi network. So you can be more aware of where you're in the city. So Google Maps is a great tool. Also just kind of taking some time to get to know the area while you're first in Stockholm, I think is a long way and is really helpful. Identifying safe havens. So this is something that Professor Helm will cover in the orientation that's done once you arrive to Stockholm. And the safe havens are really designed for large-scale emergency situations where it might be cellular communication, or you might have trouble, kind of getting in touch with people from the group. You would one of those two safe havens and find people from GW to get to a safe place or to evacuate if necessary. So one of the havens is usually the hotel that you're staying at, and then an additional safe haven will be identified by the professor. Again, anytime you're going out at night or in your free time, it's always good to double up. It's always good to share your plans with the rest of the group. There's a WhatsApp group that's created for you so that you can all stay in touch while you're on the program. I think just sharing what your plans are that night is something that we encourage you to do, and there may be other students who want to join. And just being aware of any cultural differences that might cause issues while you're there is a great tool, and you have a great cultural expert with Professor Helm. And then low profile while you're there. So again, these are general security precautions that are applicable for any time you're traveling outside the U.S. and even can be applicable while you're in the U.S. So this is, I'd like you to take a few minutes to read it, and if you can, in the chat box, and when you're sending chats, just send it to all participants. Just respond to the scenario. You are on the metro and you realize that you've lost your wallet and your passport. Okay. So one, reporting to the authorities is always a good idea, especially if it's things like your passport. You made a police report to accompany that request for a new passport. Definitely informing Professor Helm and Eileen, who will be traveling with you on the program, and then also contact the U.S. Embassy. I think for this program, it's important to recognize you don't need to carry your U.S. passport with you while you're in Stockholm. You can keep that, locked in a safe in your hotel room and carry a copy with you. If there are instances where you may need your actual passport, Professor Helm will tell you that in advance so you can make sure to bring it with you on that day. But otherwise, I would recommend just leave it locked away in your safe and then limiting the amount of things that you carry with you. And so that way, if something gets lost or stolen, that's fewer credit cards, that's fewer cash that you wouldn't lose if something like this does happen. So thank you for your suggestions. Just to finalize the security piece, if there's any type of an emergency, it is really important to make sure that you're letting Professor Helm know if something's going on. It's also a great option to call HTH Worldwide. They're really just to help with emergency situations and kind of provide next steps and guidance for how to respond or how to get in touch with doctors or hospitals to get help. So please read through it and then use the chat box to include how you would respond in this situation. Okay. Responses in the chat box? Situation. Also make sure you see your responses. At the cafe or a secure place. I think it's a great first step, making sure that the area around you is secure before trying to go anywhere else. You where having, international data on your U.S. number or having a local SIM card would be great to have so that you can immediately get in touch with someone to let people know you're okay. I think contacting HTH is also important if there's any medical attention you may need, and let the professor know that you're all right. We will be distributing, so I've given these to Eileen, the TA for the course. Is these nice bright pink emergency contact cards. So they'll be distributed to you when you arrive in Stockholm. They include things like the number call collect from any destination for HTH Worldwide. It includes a place for Professor Helm and Eileen to share their contact numbers. It includes the address and phone number of the hotel. So all this information will be given to you in a nice wallet-sized card for you to include and carry with you when you're in country. So these are really great suggestions that people have provided, and this is, a scenario that so we want to make sure that students are aware of how to respond. I think this also goes back to the point I mentioned before, having 2 meeting spots. In an instance such as this, if you can't get to one of the meeting spots, say the hotel, you can at least try to get to the meeting spot, which may be closer to you, and find people, again, from GW at those locations. So, what are 2 steps to follow in any emergency? And use the chat box to onto all participants and include what you would do in emergency. So there are 2 steps that I've highlighted a few times in the presentation. Okay. Another one would be all right. So notifying your faculty member or administrator what's going on. So making sure to notify Professor Helm and Lean of what's going on. And then the second would be calling HTH Worldwide, as Clemente had mentioned. So thank you for those responses. To summarize, as I had mentioned, but do any students have any questions in terms of like staying safe while they're overseas, or perhaps have any recommendations that they themselves usually do when they're traveling abroad? You can. Just summarize this very quickly. Making sure that you're aware of the health and safety issues of any destination using the mPassport app or HTH Worldwide. Please let us know if you do have any concerns about participating in this program. As I mentioned before, there will be a bright pink GW emergency contact card that you'll be provided with once you arrive in country, and be sure to carry that with you at all times. Make sure that you're looking into any immunizations that you may need from a health provider. So using the HTH Worldwide page to look at any immunizations that might be required for international travel to that destination, and getting those before you depart. As I mentioned before, getting extra medications, prescription or over the counter to bring with you. And then you do suffer from more severe medical problems, making sure that you have a copy of your medical records to bring with you. And so making sure you're printing out the HTH Worldwide card, the medical ID card that you have. That includes that unique certificate number for you, so that you can have that available if you do use HTH Worldwide at all while you're in Stockholm. Preparations or financial concerns, making sure you're notifying credit card companies and your bank that you're going to be traveling abroad. That's also a good time to ask them what fees they may charge, for ATM withdrawals overseas, so you can budget accordingly. But in general, just limiting the amount of cash that you're carrying on you at any one point in time. And then you can speak with Professor Helm as to, kind of how much money students typically spend. I would encourage you to look at the budget that we provide when you apply to the program. So there's an estimate for the program fee, which you've been charged for the GW arrangements that we made for you. And then there's also an out-of-pocket knowledgeable estimate. So you use that as a guide for how much you might expect to spend while you're in the country. And finally, making sure that you make copies of your passport, your visa, any credit cards that you're planning to travel with, and keeping those in a safe place. Just doing your research, I think, is the most important piece. We're going to be doing research for clients, and I would just also encourage you to do research on the destination and making sure that you are familiar with any of the immunizations you might need, any of the security concerns. But these are some tools or web pages that you can use to learn more. Switch over to the cultural orientations model and the cultural orientations indicator, which you were all asked to complete, but very few of you actually did. So this is something that I know Professor Helm is asking students to complete, especially I think it's really useful as you're starting to work in your teams on the client project. So I'm going to quickly describe what the cultural orientations indicator is, and then go a bit more into detail on the assessment. So first, I think we at the university, why we contracted with Cultural Navigator was we were really seeking to find a way for students to get information on how business is done in certain countries to supplement the content they're getting for their academic course. And this Cultural Navigator tool is a really great way to do that, while also giving you the opportunity to do a self-assessment to what your preferences are and how those might compare to the destination that you're traveling to. So it's descriptive rather than prescriptive. So that means that it's not telling you how to behave to be, globally competent. It's basically telling you, okay, you through assessment have preferences towards certain behaviors. So these are skills, abilities, or things that you might preference, especially in times of stress. And it's helpful to know that to understand how you might act in certain situations, and if the culture you're traveling to maybe perhaps reacts a different way, you can plan accordingly. It's restricted to work-related situations. So for those of you who have taken the assessment, you see that a lot of questions are related to your work. But I think what's great about this tool is that it provides applicability not only for this course, but is an assessment that you can use for your own, kind of professional work, any other travel for work you might be doing. And it is subject to self-validation, so you're your own best judge of character. And there is that to keep in mind when you're answering the questions. But the is broken down into 3 slices of a pie, and they're all color-coded with the 3 colors that are before you. So first is the sense, kind of how you view, identify yourself, and what motivates you. So the thinking style, so how you're interpreting information, and then finally your interaction style. So how do you use that information? How do you use your motivation to people? And aligned with what Cultural Navigator's definition of culture is, which is listed at the bottom of the slide. And so that's really the connection between behaviors, beliefs, and emotions that are enforced and rewarded by and within particular groups. Person, you are made up by many different groups, and I think that's the important thing to emphasize here is that we all are part of a different age group, we're all part of a different socioeconomic class, we all may come from different countries, we all may have certain levels of education or certain professional fields that all really influence our behaviors and our preferences in this assessment. So I think it's important to see, as you mentioned, or as is mentioned on the slide, the sense self piece really relates to your emotions, and the green piece looks at your beliefs and your assumptions, and then finally the blue action style discusses behaviors. So for those of you that have done it, you'll see that they break things down on a continuum. So again, no right or wrong way to behave. There are just 2 opposing parts, and that will describe certain behaviors. So for example, you could be someone who's more being versus someone who's more doing. And so how that relates to a professional context is people who towards being might see value in developing relationships with their coworkers and leveraging those relationships to get things done in their job. Whereas those who are more focused on doing may see building relationships as almost, a waste of time, and that they're just there to make sure that they get the tasks completed they need to complete. Kind of two extremes of the spectrum, and students can fall anywhere in between that continuum. So that highlights if you're strong or very strong. What that means is that's more likely to drive your behavior and emotional reactions, especially under stress. While you are working on your final client presentation in home, it can be a high stress situation, and so it's good to know the areas that you rank strong or very strong in, so that you can plan, especially as you're working within your team. For those who fall in the blue area, which is mild, means is that you still have a preference to one side or the other, but that you have the ability to what they say style switch. So if you are in an environment where perhaps it's more doing rather than being, you can easily switch from doing to being without much effort. So again, I'm happy to discuss for students who have done the COI and would like a bit more breakdown of their own specific results from the assessment. I'm happy to provide kind of individual debriefs or have brief conversations with students about their results. But I'm just going to briefly touch on the three mentioned before and the different cultural preferences that are included in each of those pieces of the pie. So one example for the sense of self, which again is touching on your emotions, respond, or how you are motivated by the work that you do. And so a good example of that might be hierarchical versus looking from equality. So it's really, kind of how what the distribution of privilege and power might be. And so in your teams, you may have a team leader, but is that if you're more hierarchical, you might then just follow whatever the team leader decides for the group. If you prefer equality, you may be more open to engaging in dialogue with the whole team when you're trying to make a decision. So this is just an example of the sense of self. And I've described on this slide all of the other that make up this piece of pie. First, a number of different preferences that are related to thinking style and how you behave. And one example of that is looking at past versus future. So how you prefer to reference information. As you're doing research for your client, are you going to be looking towards the past? Are you going to be looking at, kind of the historical records of the company that you're working for? Are you going to be looking at competitors and some other things that they have done in the past or are you going to be brainstorming to create a new idea, a new unique recommendation for clients? So again, these are just two different preferences, but again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just knowing what side of the continuum you lean more towards. Finally, for interaction style, which is the blue piece of the pie, I already touched on being and doing, and so again, this is just more how you interact with people. So another example might be, are you very informal with your interactions, or are you more formal? And knowing that about yourself and knowing that about your other teammates really helps in making sure that things run smoothly. We've done the assessment, and again, for those of you who haven't done it, I encourage you to take the 10 minutes it takes to do the assessment and really read through the results. And so there are some applications for it. At this point, I'm going to leave the presentation and just log into my own cultural see. This is the results of my own COI assessment. And then what I want to show you is there is opportunity for you to network and create teams. As you take the COI, oh, it's going to make me log again. It usually does this. Let me just log in really quick. Work button. It allows you the opportunity to create a team. So I've created a team of the other members that make up the Global and Experiential Education team. And what I can do is I can look at members of your team for this course. You can do what's called the team gap analysis. This is, let's do the aggregate report. Yeah, so it'll create an aggregate report so that you can see how many members of your team are on the fluid side of interaction style versus the fixed of interaction style. And so if there are ever instances where, for example, in terms of there's, half of the group is more informal versus half of the group is more formal. What does that mean, for example, in an instance like where people might be more expressive, whereas in how they interact with people compared to 3 members of the team that are more instrumental and more transactional in how they interact with people. So those are important things to keep in mind as you're going through this aggregate report, and also, kind of knowing more about yourself and about your teammates and how they process information and how they interact is a really useful tool for this report. I would also then encourage you to look at the country guides. Explore a country, and it's one of the countries that they have information on. So we'll click on. It talks about, just basic facts. And I think some of the nice things about that is that, especially under the travel section, it shows you, for example, what type of voltage and what the outlets look like, so you can make sure you have the appropriate adapters. But the left side is the piece that I really wanted to highlight. You're all working with a Swedish client, and so this section shows what the professional expectations are for doing business in Sweden. So how you interact with your Swedish counterpart in terms of greetings, in terms of communication patterns. It also has a section of working with teams. Also has a section, so how are meetings usually conducted? You might be meeting with your client virtually before you travel to Stockholm, but then also there's a section on presentation. So what are the general expectations for presentations that are done in Sweden? And this is information. So again, it's meant to monitor cultural trends of a country, but I do think it's still a very useful tool to help give you a frame of reference for the internet and for the work they're doing with a client in Sweden. And then to the right side of the page, you can see that there is a section where you can compare the cultural norms of Sweden with your own results from the COI assessment. And so looking at that, I have 6 different cultural gaps with, and so looking what's the interaction style? You can just view and a PDF of that information that you can use. You can know kind of what the differences are between you and. So, for example, here I'm a more direct person, whereas it tends to lean more towards the very indirect type of communication. So, I'm going to know about how to interact with Swedish colleagues. And also using the team tool to your teammates and how you might interact as well. I think I've touched on most of the items that the Cultural Navigator tool has to offer. There's also things like a country quiz if you want to test your knowledge before you travel. You can learn phrases in the host country, which I think can go a really long way, especially in Swedish. And then, again, I really encourage you to identify any cultural gaps that you might have with the cultural norms of Sweden before you travel. Those of you who have completed COI, I would like to ask just, I've posed a few questions, but I know many students haven't actually taken the assessment yet. And if someone has taken the assessment, I did want to open it up for them to write a comment of maybe, kind of something about the analysis, something that's affirmed by the analysis, results on the assessment. So if it has any feedback on the Cultural Navigator platform or the COI assessment, you can include in the chat box now. an issue with the password, and she just emailed the administration and they reset the account. So thank you, Kylie, for sharing that. And again, that's a great suggestion for any students that are encountering any trouble with the password. You can know the email either Cultural Navigator, or you can let us know and we can make to get the password reset for you. Assessment, and if so, did you have any feedback or reflections on the assessment? For contributing as well. She learns that she prefers a more structured environment or formal style when conducting business. And so, I mean, that's something to know. And I think when you said the more formal style, it's, the country gap analysis, Sweden may lean more towards the informal style. So what can you do to kind of bring yourself to a more informal environment when you're interacting and presenting with the client? So these are all great pieces of the assessment and of the tool that we really encourage students to take advantage of. So in regards to Cultural Navigator and your interaction with students, to play the student card. So you are all professionals in your own right. While you're participating in this course, you are, a student, and so you can play the student card in terms of if you have questions about, why things are done a certain way, or if you observed a certain interaction between two and you're just curious, kind of why it resulted, what resulted the way it did. You can ask, I'm curious because I saw that, this decision was made in this way, kind of it's traditionally done in Sweden, or how that might relate to their own cultural norms. So again, feel free to ask questions and be curious, as long as you're doing so in a respectful manner. I think it can only help you learn more about the country that you're working with. So the Cultural Navigators, which is, to raise your own self-awareness, the COI assessment that provides you with what they call other awareness. Having that open attitude to the event and to the results provides you with some insights by observing your own behavior and the behavior of others. Really allow you to make yourself more open to the cultural norms of different countries and how you might be able to adapt, or as they say, style switch where appropriate, or just engage in cultural dialogue, as I had mentioned before, playing the student card and exploring, kind of cultural differences and how to negotiate those as well. So, but before I get to that, does anyone have any other questions or comments about the Cultural Navigator tool? See how we are on time. Okay. Do you want to talk briefly about any plans that you have to incorporate the tool for the course or for the students' work as a team?
So this was a great overview, and I think it's obvious to the students how helpful this can be. We had a webinar last night, and I talked a little bit about the Cultural Navigator then, and that it will be an integral of the teamwork. So what we can do is to incorporate that into the team chart so that the teams will have to do their own individual analysis, of course, but that's the different gaps that they have. So that part will be included. And I definitely also think that students on their own should look at their comparison with the country profile. It looked like very helpful as well. But you will be individually and setting up your team, your network inside Cultural Navigator, and then be asked to request on, let's say, if you have the biggest ways from that gap analysis in your team charter. So that's what we have in mind. Also, of course, I encourage you to use it as a resource, as a tool, especially when you encounter issues, difficulties, when you don't understand certain situations. It's a good way to kind of go back and try to dig a little bit deeper in the culture. Of course, as a resource, and Eileen has also been to Sweden several times before, so we'll all be discussing this and experiencing it together. But I would definitely say, yes, go ahead and do the analysis, start thinking of it, look your profile, and then we'll connect you. They're available now in Blackboard. Their group page is set up. I did that after the the session last night, you can start communicating with your team already. And this is what you do now, soon, very quickly, because it will actually prevent some issues and complications in the teamwork. That's what I have in mind, and thank you, Lisa, for making all of this available to the students. I think it's a wonderful tool.
Great. We're happy to share it as well, and so that Professor Helm is using it as part of the course. I mean, I think the team tool is really eye-opening, especially as you start to work together. So I just wanted to end with some final things to keep in mind. Some things that students, tend to forget right before they leave. And so things like how you'll get foreign currency when you arrive in Sweden, looking at the hotel that you're traveling to and what amenities they might have. So there might be certain things that you can leave at home, certain things you want to make sure that you remember doing that aren't included in the hotel room. That you can all reference from the Radisson Blu's webpage. Then also things like transportation. So, public transportation is very useful in Sweden, so how are you planning to use that to get to the hotel? And again, information that Professor Helm and Eileen can share with you from their own experiences prior to the start of the course. The biggest thing is, we have dietary restrictions from you that you let know when you initially applied in GW Passport. If any of those medical or dietary restrictions have changed, please let us know so that we can notify the local vendor in country who is planning some meals for you. And finally, I would also recommend to look into international data plans of your U.S. number, or look into buying a local SIM card, so that way that you're always able to be in touch with the group during time in Stockholm. Are the GW Passport requirements, which there are a few of you that are still missing some. Print HGH Worldwide ID card, and again, that's unique to you, and if you can't find that HGH email, don't worry, we're happy to send you a new one, email, and then downloading the mPassport app, and then following us on Instagram, because you are traveling on this program, and unfortunately I can't travel on all of them, and so I really rely on students to provide pictures or videos or any way to capture the experience that they've had in Sweden, so that can use those photos and those videos as a tool to market and promote the program with other students. So if you use either of these hashtags, GWSB Abroad or only at GWSB, those hashtags that we monitor frequently, so we will be able to see the pictures and monitor and the that you're going to be having in Sweden. So, do you have any questions?
So very quickly, and please feel free to continue posting questions here. In Blackboard, the students have available under the tab In-Country Information. There's my phone number. There is the address for the hotel, phone number, all that stuff that you need, and also a list of dress code that is expected for each day. There's also on information how best to get from Arlanda Airport to the Radisson Blu. The good thing about the hotel is that it is located right in the middle of Stockholm, and you can easily get there either with trains, because it's right at the train station, or with the subway system. There's also buses that go quickly, so it's very easy to get to them. And of course, taxis are there. All the taxis, I think, that actually leave Arlanda Airport have to be green vehicles, so it's actually indicative of Sweden, all the sustainability that you'll be exposed to when you go. So in there also eventually we will post the room assignments. You'll be rooming with another person, and all that information will go in there as well. And there'll be a detailed schedule of what we'll do each day. But for now, I think at this point you have all the critical information already in Blackboard. And if there's anything that you need to know, definitely reach out to myself or to Eileen. I'll try to get back to you as soon as we possibly can. But also would be happy to answer any questions you have right here now in the webinar.
Great. I'm glad to hear that information has been shared with students. I'm sure they're already using it as a resource in Blackboard. For the chat box, it doesn't look like any students have posed questions, although perhaps they were answered yesterday with your session last night. So if students have further questions, the fbintl@gwu.edu is our general email account, which is monitored daily, and then lbranch@gwu.edu is my direct email. So if you have any questions or would like to speak further, please feel free to email me, and we will be. I want to wish you all a wonderful program in Stockholm. This is, Professor has a lot of experience taking students to and plans a wonderful program for students in the country, and so I know you'll have a great experience. And if you have questions related to any of the information I provided, just free to let me know. But thank you for joining, and I hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
This is informative, and I think got a lot of the questions answered. And thank you for those of you who took your time out for lunch to and I'll make the also the recording available. So we'll get that out to you. So great. Thank you.
Thank you.